Hello and welcome to today's interview featuring women in startups and the business world. Today's guest is Calli McCartan, and she is the owner and founder of Charity Event Auctions. Calli, thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Hi, thanks, Caitlin. I'm really excited to be here.
Fantastic. So to jump into my first question is, could you tell me a little bit more about Charity Event Auctions and what you do?
Definitely. Okay, so Charity Event Auctions is the company that I launched this year in order to help nonprofit organizations, charities, and artists to connect with their donors and raise more money. And how we do that started as purely through auctions and has grown to actually include a lot of helping with funded needs, special appeals on asks, and fundraising consulting for the year long. And we work with all sorts of nonprofits, small to large, kind of a la carte style, depending what's best for each of the sizes. And also we have a focus towards artists and theaters and businesses that want to raise money for their favorite nonprofit instead of always through just the nonprofit themselves.
You know, that's really cool to hear about the theater side of things. So for the most part, when I think of auctioneering, I think of what it was like back in my hometown, which was to raise money for any sports events. And that's kind of all I was experiencing. But it's really interesting to hear your different perspective and your different take on that with some of the creative arts, incorporating that in addition to your other business steps as well.
Yeah. So, I mean, I come from a theatrical background myself, and I have helped with multiple different types of nonprofits kind of all throughout my life. And what I noticed was when it came to the arts, you always do performance and asking for money. And I thought, I love the arts so much. When I started this, one of the primary things I wanted to do was to help theaters and different artists and music groups be able to raise more money in a more diverse set of fundraising ways, especially coming out of COVID. So right now, they, even when they are performing, can in many states only be at like 50% capacity for who's in the room. So I put together some creative ideas to help out kind of covering that gap of the funds that they're raising, because I think artists are so important in not only helping build culture of the United States and different communities, but also in stimulating the economy as well. And so it's so important to provide resources and do fundraising to help the artistic community stay healthy and be able to flourish, as well as all of the rest of the amazing nonprofits out there. So I wanted to make sure to not just leave them out, but to include them in who I was reaching out to, because there's some creative, fun ideas to help creatives raise more money as well. So
It's really cool to hear your perspective on that. And your inclusivity is really showing through. I know that's in your business model, is to be inclusive. And so it's very, very cool to see your real world application of that. So you touched on this a little bit, is that you have a theater background. So then I want to ask you is, what inspired you to become an entrepreneur? Because sometimes, we don't always think about theater. When you hear theater, you don't think entrepreneur, business owner. Tell me a little bit about your story.
yeah, definitely. So it was one of those things that I think even as I was getting my degree in theater, I really debated, like, do I go for a business degree or a theater degree, or like, where do I start? And I actually ended up falling in love with all of the skills that I was learning throughout theater, even when it pertained to different industries. So I started wanting to do performance and I kept that up, but I found that my heart was leaning into these really unique kind of little real world niches of the theater industry. Like, I was in love with the idea of how theater artists go into businesses and teach empathy, communication, and teamwork, and how they, teach in schools or go into hospitals and do training programs so that nurses and doctors can get used to working with real world patients. And so all of these are kind of those like unique niches of how the theater industry goes and helps real world causes in a more active, like person to person way, not just in a visual or from a distance way, which is also really important. But I fell in love with that in-person connection. And so when I was thinking of how can I do this, I got a job traveling on the road with a traveling children's theater. And I learned so much throughout that, but it also gave me a lot of time to reflect and realize how much I loved and missed the business side of me. I had always really flourished with speech team and doing fundraising whenever there was school trips and things like that. And so I ended up actually approaching a family member who is an auctioneer, and they usually focus on personal property auctioneering, but they had mentioned the world of benefit auctioneering and nonprofit auctioneering before. So I approached them and was like, okay, tell me more about this. What even is this? And they gave me a few websites of some powerhouse female auctioneers to go look at. And I had never seen anything like it. I mean, I had seen, benefit auctioneers before, but I hadn't seen these really awesome powerhouse companies. So I dove into it more, and I kind of fell in love with the idea of you're putting together fundraising events, you're putting together this performance, and you have to work on script writing, structuring it like a show, but at the same time with this business financial side that was really focused on like, we're going to raise a monetary amount that will go and make this difference. And I really like that structure and that organization, but it still has that empathy and connecting with real world people. And so all of my theater background was kind of training what people would call soft skills on a resume. And after that, I kind of felt like I had all those soft skills. I had different business experience, and I learned so much about finance traveling on the road. And so I came together and I decided, let's look into this and let's transition the career this way, because it was that kind of accumulation of theater and business that I felt I always was in love with and wanted to find. So that's kind of how I got started.
Wow. So just listening to you a little bit, it sounds like left brain, right brain are very cohesive with each other. You have, like you said, the soft skills and the hard skills, the creative and the business. That is so fascinating to hear, because not all the time do you get to hear about people who can be both. I feel like that really leads into how your business is helping for people. And again, it just is really cool to get to see how you're supportive of the arts as well, since of your background.
Yeah, thank you. I really love kind of both worlds, and I want to create a company where I can help different types of clients and different types of people that have that accumulation of, as you said, that left and right brain working together, and use those skills to benefit people to go do what they do best. So I think it's really somewhere I've fallen in love with, and I hope to use it to go make a really positive difference. So
absolutely. So when was Charity Event Auctions founded?
2021, kind of the turn of the year. So it's been multiple months in the process of building it, but we officially launched in February and started reaching out. And then we've used the term a little bit since, when we started building more social media in March, and kind of building as we go. It would be launching different parts of the project, but really February this year was kind of the turn of, it's been building, it's been whatever 2020 was, and then seeing there was a gap in my community that I wanted to help fill and provide these resources for. I decided 2021 is going to be, the vision year, and we're going to go for it. So I decided to launch right away. Yeah.
Yes. So I believe you said it, and if you didn't, I know I've heard it before, but entrepreneurship is the future. And I think you are a fantastic example of that, being that it is 2021. We are trying to jumpstart the economy, and I think that exactly applies to what you're doing. So again, congratulations on starting a business during a pandemic.
It's definitely been wild, that's for sure. Mm-hmm. All of my clients I'm working with, like, all over Zoom, and but at the same time, you're right, entrepreneurship is the future, and the idea of how can we be flexible was really built into, well, why was this a niche that needed to be filled? Because there needed to be something that was flexible for both virtual events and in-person and hybrid, and whatever the future brings, kind of be ready for it. So,
and I feel like adaptivity, being flexible, like you said, or adaptive, is what makes you a successful entrepreneur, or at least gives you a foot in the door. So, it's fantastic to learn more about your business. So my next question, you are a young person. So my new question is now, what has your experience been being a young business owner? What are some of the pros that you have experienced, and what are like some of the cons?
Yeah. So let's start with some of the cons. Some of the cons are that there's always a learning curve. I mean, especially when you're starting in a business that, I mean, I learned so much from my theatrical background that goes into it, but technically it wasn't my degree. And so there's just so many learning curves. And I feel like even if you get a job that's in your degree, you'll run into a lot of that from everything I've been hearing from people across many industries. But it's just, there's learning curves starting your own business. There's learning curves working with clients directly. There's learning curves in pretty much every single aspect. And I think in a way I'm benefited for being young with this, because I'm completely like, I want to learn. I'm really hungry to learn and to improve. And I know, I mean, that hunger can last with you no matter how old you get, but being young, it's like, I'm really open to foster that. And I think when people see you, I mean, there's definitely, they view me as someone who is willing to, if I don't know the answer to something, they feel like, because I'm young, I'm going to go and figure it out. I'm going to go find that answer and really dive into it. And you can do that at any age, but I think that the stereotype is that the young, hungry person is going to go do that. So in a way that's beneficial, but in, a con of that is that there's definitely even though I have so much experience, there's like a lack of experience of necessarily being in like the nonprofit scape. Like I have worked with so many nonprofits and I've been in all these different roles, but when it comes to like actually building a nonprofit or, people who have had years upon years of working with nonprofits, there's definitely a lot that you learn and gain from that. And that should never be, undercut. Like experience is so much. And so sometimes people will think, you're young. How do you have like the mindset to teach someone? But that's something that I've been building through the life of theater and through the life of teaching is, being an outside perspective to view, to really find the problems and to try to come up with creative solutions. And as I said, when you don't know the answer to it, go find someone who does and go reach out for that. So that's been a really benefit of mine from kind of just my attitude and from growing up, knowing other entrepreneurs and knowing other people who just know what it takes to build a company. And so it's been really beneficial for me to have that, but sometimes people don't necessarily know that you come from that background. So they assume you don't have the experience. How can you help me? And I guess what I have to do as a young person is just really find the ways to communicate that as efficiently as I can. And then also to reach out to other young people. And there are so many amazing young people who are starting up nonprofits and who are working in this space who sometimes they're a little bit more open. If they're in a newer nonprofit, they're kind of open to like everything because they need all the resources they can get. And so part of what I do is I can go to the smaller nonprofits and be like, I don't necessarily have 20 years of experience, but I do have 22 years of being who I am. And here's the experience that I have accumulated. And are you flexible to someone who's willing to take some risks and try out something to make sure I'm, getting that experience to find what's best for you? And a lot of times people are really open to that, especially if they're in that smaller or medium-sized nonprofit like landscape. So it's definitely, you run into that challenge of not having years and years of experience. But it's all about, finding who you can help to build that experience, who's open to it, who will be really receptive to it, and then finding ways to build that muscle and strength to gain it and to be learning from every single thing I do, so that in my 2 years from now, in 5 years from now, I can say this 2 years of experience matches 20 years with one organization, because I've helped all these different ones in all these different ways. So it's just mindset, and it's just how you communicate everything.
Mm-hmm. Very nice. So then you're in the room with people who have been in the business for about 15, 20 years. You've worked with people, and I believe you told me you worked with Whistle Binkies in Rochester, Minnesota, correct?
Definitely. Yeah. They are a restaurant that's been around for so long. And that's actually part of what inspired me to want to help businesses that have a favorite nonprofit, because their favorite nonprofit is the National Alliance on Mental Illness. And I help them with a fundraising event for that organization. They're absolutely great, super awesome guys. And everyone that I met through that process has been so open to, here's what I know, take what you can, learn from it, and just gain experience as you go. And they're amazing people with an amazing cause. So, yeah.
So have you experienced any intimidation working with people who are like much older than you? What has your experience been with that?
Yeah, definitely. I think one of my examples is that they think since you are young, that you are willing to take any job opportunity. And so one example is that, I've built this business, and even though it's flexible, it's ebbing and flowing and finding how to fit the perfect niche in this community and in communities countrywide. How can I help solve people's problems and fit that niche? There's also something to be said about knowing your boundaries. I have had a couple people be like, you're young, you'll do anything. How about become like a third party salesman of sponsorships and things like that? And I know from my background, all of these things, like I completely understand how nice it sounds to be able to solve a problem so quickly. But at the same time, some of these things are built on relationship building. And sometimes it's better to, teach and give people the skills to go do things like that themselves, because I can't be a member of every nonprofit organization. I can't be coming from the source. But yeah, I think a lot of times it doesn't necessarily come with bad intentions. But at the same time, people assume that you are young and you'll do anything for the gold, for the money. And it definitely takes a little bit of knowing yourself and your boundaries to know what is being flexible and what is a line that I'm not going to cross, because it really isn't true to who I am and the company I want to build for the long run. So yeah, it takes some self-reflection, that's for sure. Some people, as I said, sometimes it comes with the best intentions, but it doesn't necessarily point you to the right path. And it's important to know what that is, and also have a good community of trusty adversaries, I would say, people who can, give some advice, help you build that network, and then help talk it through and make sure that whatever path that I am stepping my feet on is going to be one that's true to myself and true to what I want my business to be. So yeah.
Mm-hmm. And I think one thing that also stood out to me is that boundary setting. Mm-hmm. And so also time management, that is also one of the things that comes within your boundaries. So would you say that being able to say yes and say no has helped you with time management as well, to make sure your business grows correctly?
Yeah, actually, that's something that I learned from being in the theater. Mm-hmm. There are so many projects to do and problems to solve and people to help. And it was really important growing up in a degree where there's always a million things going on, and having to manage what are my top few priorities for the day, what are my top few priorities for the next month, and how to keep everything else on the back burner, not to burn those bridges, but to be able to very graciously and gracefully say no to projects has been a skill that I've had to acquire over time. And it definitely comes in very helpful being a business owner, because especially right now as a one-woman show, there's different connections, but throughout, like right now, it's completely built on like my schedule. So what can I do? And I want to help everybody out there, but that's not always possible. So knowing, you're right, that goes right in with boundary setting, and being able to gracefully say no or not right now is a really important skill that I've definitely run into.
Mm-hmm. So we were talking off screen, and you had told me that auctioneering is a predominantly male-run, project company sort of a thing. Mm-hmm. Could you tell me a little bit more about your experience as a woman within this field?
Yeah, so I think I'm entering at an interesting time, because over the last few years, especially in the fundraising community, it's definitely a lot more women are entering the field and the industry, which is awesome. And in, auctioneering is this really, really wide industry, and you have everything from like automobile auctions to personal property, real estate, a lot of cattle and, rural farm equipment, things like that. And then fundraising. And I would say fundraising is definitely the one that has the most women in it. And then, but in general, women are entering the industry at a faster rate than ever before, but it's still like only 17% of all auctioneers. And so, yeah, it's, and I think because of that, if you think about it, when you think of like, okay, what percentage of farmers are women? Like it's growing, it's definitely growing, or women who are able to actually write that off as like, I am the owner of the farm, or I am looking for all this equipment. It's a lot of that side of the auction industry is, it takes you're slowly developing those new gender roles. And I think over the last few years, it definitely has increased. But the industry itself has also gone online. And so I think there's also something to be said about like how even though the actual auctioneer isn't necessarily more women, except in the fundraising side, and it might be in a couple other of the sides. I don't know the exact statistics, but it's definitely overall not as many women auctioneers. That isn't to say that there aren't really strong players who have been growing and advocating for women in the industry. And that also isn't to say that in all of these online auctions out there, like they have so many jobs behind the scenes. So there are so many women who are clerks, cashiers, digital marketing space is huge, and graphic design for the auction industry. So there's a lot of women who are really starting to show up and dominate in those sides of the industry, which is equally as important. And so, and then also the way that internships are being presented and that opportunities are being grown, a lot of women who are business owners or the auctioneers are opening up doors to allow a lot more women into the industry. So it's been really, I think it's an interesting time because it's been growing and the roles are all changing and shifting in, in their strengths in the industry and what all is important. And I think keeping up on it and just keeping those doors open and staying welcoming is one of the most important parts, and just advocating and creating opportunities and choosing women to take those opportunities and really grow with it. There's some awesome powerhouses who have demonstrated how amazing women can be as auctioneers. And if you think about it, what's crazy is that like the first women who were auctioneers in the United States, this was in the 1950s. Like the first women auctioneers were in the 1950s. Wow. That's insane to me. And I was reading up, I actually have an article on my website all about the first women auctioneers. And, there was just this assumption that they were too weak to do the chant for super long. And, they were the housewives of the farmers and things like that. And these women who started it, they just kind of showed up in sparkly hats, giant glasses, and were like, nah, we can do anything. And they kind of started the stage when it came to fundraising. And from then it's been trickling into all the different parts of the industry. So it's been really cool to watch that happen and be a part of it for sure.
Wow, I'm definitely going to check out that article. That is absolutely crazy. And, it's reminding me a little bit of history class, like, credit cards, for example. Women weren't able to have their own credit card until I believe the 60s or 70s. So that's
isn't it crazy? Like, I didn't realize how long it took for some of these things to happen.
Yeah. Well, and then I believe, if I'm not mistaken, too, is that even if they were to get a credit card, they had to have husband's approval. So absolutely wild. So I will say the answers that you have for my questions have been very inspiring, and especially like as a young businesswoman myself. So I wanted to ask you then do you have any more advice for young entrepreneurs like yourself, whether they are young or if they are women? What advice do you have?
I think a lot of things start with mindset. And the first thing that I would say is to be gracefully fearless. Know what you don't know and be open about that. But at the same time, you can know what you don't know. And that does not mean that you are going to put yourself down or that you are too afraid to go up and ask someone. And I think like most of my big advances and wins have been from having really fearless moments of saying, all right, I don't know how to do this, but I'm going to get it done. I'm going to figure it out. And I'm also going to go and approach people and learn from them. Not everyone's going to be receptive to helping young entrepreneurs, but more people are going to be receptive than you think. They just want you to reach out because they aren't going to know you're there or that you need help if you don't stand up and say like, hey, I'm going to be the next awesome auctioneer. Who's going to help me? And I promise I will sweep the floor if you teach me like how to be an awesome auctioneer on the side. And so I think like having that grace to know what you don't know, but also being fearless to go and find out and to go and create connections, create resources. And sometimes that is starting with other young people and then, moving your way up. But there's amazing people of every age and every type of person out there who is an entrepreneur. And so like go and learn from them and go ask questions and be fearless and just put your mind to it. And if something doesn't work, it's okay. Something else will. Like just, have your motivation, why you're doing everything. And even if your story and your business model changes over time, it doesn't mean that you're not being successful. It means you're finding a way to be even more successful because you are adapting to the world you're in and the place where you can help the most. Entrepreneurs are so necessary to this economy and to this country and to the world. And I think so much starts with mindset. So don't let yourself get beat down by the hard work, and just put it in, ask for help, and you'll definitely make it happen and see amazing results. So yeah, just do it. I love it.
Thanks so much for that input, Calli. Before we completely close out, I wanted to ask, do you have any final thoughts you wanted to share, or wanted to share any information about where the audience can find and learn more about charity event auctions?
Sure, yeah. So you can start by going to charityeventauctions.com. That's my website. I'm actually right now super excited because I'm building up the free resources section of the website. It's going to be growing a lot in the next couple months, putting more resources out there for people to get excited about their auctions and their fundraising. On there's a contact page, but you can also just email me at Calli@charityeventauctions.com. And we're also on Facebook and Instagram at Charity Event Auctions. So it's all the same, pretty easy to find. Just look it up and find us, follow us, and let me know if you're interested in, doing some more fundraising. I'd be happy to take the time to talk to anyone interested in that. So yeah, that's where to find me.
Thank you so much, Calli. I really appreciate your availability to talk to us here at Mug.News.
Oh, awesome. Thanks so much. I have really, really enjoyed this. It's been completely awesome. Thanks for taking the time to talk to me, Caitlin. I'm really excited to see how this grows and how I can help my community in this next year and more and going forward. So yeah, Charity Event Auctions is pretty new, but it's here to stay, and I'm super excited to see how it grows.
Thanks so much, Calli.
Thanks so much. Bye.